San Diego, California, August 1996. The air hung thick with the scent of oleander and salt, a familiar perfume carried on the gentle ocean breeze that routinely swept through the city's canyons and boulevards. For Sarah Jenkins, a 28-year-old registered nurse at Scripps Mercy Hospital, it was simply the smell of home. Her modest, meticulously kept apartment in Normal Heights, a quiet, tree-lined neighborhood perched above Mission Valley, was her sanctuary after grueling 12-hour shifts. The walls were adorned with framed prints of abstract art and sepia-toned family photographs, snapshots of a life quietly, purposefully lived. Sarah was not flashy, not one for grand gestures. Her life was defined by dedication. To her patients, to her meticulously planned schedules, to the small circle of loved ones she held dear. Her younger sister, Emily, a vivacious 24-year-old art student, was her anchor in the bustling city, a constant source of laughter and shared confidences. Their parents settled comfortably in a small town outside Portland, Oregon, were a comforting presence via weekly Sunday calls on Sarah's beige landline phone, its cord stretched across the Formica kitchen counter. Sarah's routine was a carefully orchestrated symphony of early mornings, hospital corridors, and quiet evenings. She drove her reliable, if slightly worn, Honda Civic to work, navigating the morning rush hour with practiced ease. Her nursing colleagues knew her as a calm, competent presence, someone who could handle the most stressful emergencies with a steady hand and a kind word. Outside of work, her life was simple. Walks through Balboa Park, a book club with a few friends, occasional dinners with Emily at a casual Italian spot on Adams Avenue. Romance had recently taken a backseat after an amicable but definitive split from her long-term boyfriend, Mark, who had since moved to Arizona. Sarah was, by all accounts, content with her quiet independence, but in the humid weeks leading up to her disappearance, a subtle discord began to creep into Sarah's symphony. It started with the phone calls, hang-ups. Always in the evening after she'd returned from work, she'd answer, hear nothing but dead air, then a click. The first few times, she dismissed them as wrong numbers, the minor annoyances of a landline in an era before caller ID was ubiquitous. But they became more frequent, almost nightly. A prickle of unease, faint at first, began to form a knot in her stomach. She mentioned it to Emily over coffee one Saturday morning. Emily, ever practical, suggested it was probably just telemarketers. Sarah wanted to believe her, but the calls felt different, more deliberate. Then there was the man. He wasn't a stranger, not exactly. Arthur Vance, a distant relative of a patient who had recently passed away at Scripps Mercy, had been noticeably attentive during his visits. He was in his late 40s, neatly dressed, with a quiet intensity in his eyes that Sarah found unsettling. After his relative's funeral, he'd started showing up at the hospital, claiming to just be in the neighborhood and wanted to thank her again for her care. Then, one evening, she spotted him across the street from her apartment building, leaning against a lamppost, ostensibly reading a newspaper. He looked up, offered a small, knowing smile, and walked away. Sarah's heart hammered. Coincidence? She told herself it had to be. San Diego wasn't a small town, but it wasn't New York City either. Maybe he lived nearby. Yet the feeling of being watched, once fleeting, intensified. She found herself checking her rearview mirror more often, locking her apartment door with an extra turn of the deadbolt. She confided in Emily again, more urgently this time. It just feels off, Em. Like someone knows my schedule, knows where I am. Emily, sensing the genuine fear in her sister's voice, urged her to report it. Sarah hesitated, rationalizing. What would I even say? A man looked at me. I got hang-up calls, she worried. She sounded paranoid. The last time Emily saw Sarah was Tuesday, August 27, 1996. Sarah had worked a demanding evening shift, scheduled to end at 11 p.m. She'd called Emily just before clocking out, her voice tired but otherwise normal. Long one tonight, heading home, might grab a soda from the 7-Eleven on the way. See you Sunday for brunch. Emily remembered the call vividly. She'd wished her sister a good night, a mundane exchange that would forever be etched in her memory as a final farewell. Wednesday morning dawned bright and clear, indifferent to the quiet horror that was unfolding. Emily tried calling Sarah around 9 a.m., expecting her sister to be awake after a late shift. No answer. She tried again an hour later, still nothing. A flicker of worry turned into a slow burn. Sarah was meticulous about returning calls. By noon, a cold dread had settled in Emily's stomach. She drove her beat-up Ford Fiesta across town to Sarah's apartment in Normal Heights. The Honda Civic was in its usual spot in the small parking lot, relief mingled with a deeper unease. Maybe Sarah was just asleep or had gone for a walk without her pager. Emily knocked, no answer. She used her spare key, a contingency Sarah insisted upon, just in case. The apartment was immaculate, undisturbed. Sarah's nurse's uniform hung neatly on a hook by the door, ready for the next shift. Her purse, keys, and wallet sat on the kitchen counter, exactly where she left them every night. Even her worn copy of the bell jar lay open on her bedside table, a bookmark tucked between its pages. The window was closed and locked. There were no signs of forced entry, no struggle, no indication that anything was amiss except for one glaring, terrifying fact. Sarah Jenkins was not there. It was as if she had simply vanished into thin air. Emily's frantic call to the San Diego Police Department was met with the measured calm of Officer Miller, the first responder. He listened patiently to Emily's increasingly panicked account. "Ma'am, it's only been a few hours. Adults have a right to disappear." But the officer, a seasoned veteran, saw the genuine distress in Emily's eyes, the unusual circumstances, the car, the keys, the wallet, all left behind. This wasn't a spontaneous walk-off. He initiated the preliminary report, and within hours, the case landed on the desk of Detective Alex Ramirez, a lean, sharp-eyed man in his early 40s, known for his methodical approach to the city's grim realities. Detective Ramirez, along with his partner, began the painstaking work. They scoured Sarah's apartment, looking for anything out of place, any sign of a struggle, anything that could offer a clue. Nothing. Neighbors were questioned, a difficult task in a city where anonymity was common. Most had only a vague recollection of Sarah, a polite nod in the hallway. No one had seen anything unusual on Tuesday night or Wednesday morning. The 7-Eleven clerk had a vague memory of a woman matching Sarah's description buying a soda around 11:30 p.m., but couldn't be certain. The security camera footage from the convenience store, grainy and low resolution, showed a blurry figure, but offered no definitive identification or any glimpse of an altercation. The initial investigation focused on Sarah's known contacts. Colleagues at Scripps Mercy spoke highly of her, offering no insights into any potential enemies or secret lives. Friends expressed shock and confusion. Emily provided the names of Sarah's previous boyfriends, including Mark, who was quickly cleared by an ironclad alibi from Arizona. The hang-up calls were noted, but without caller ID or a suspect, they led nowhere. The brief mention of Arthur Vance, the patient's relative, was taken down, but without a concrete accusation. It was just one of many vague leads in a sea of unknowns. Ramirez had a gut feeling about the calls, about the man Sarah mentioned, but gut feelings weren't evidence. The early days of the search were a whirlwind of hope and crushing disappointment. Emily, joined by her distraught parents who had flown in from Oregon, organized search parties, plastering missing person flyers with Sarah's smiling face on every lamppost, bus stop, and community board across San Diego. Local news outlets picked up the story, showing footage of Emily, her voice cracking as she pleaded for any information. The community rallied, offering prayers and support, but no credible leads emerged. The San Diego sun, once a source of comfort, now seemed to mock their despair, shining relentlessly on an increasingly cold trail. Weeks bled into months. The initial media flurry faded, replaced by other headlines. The police, despite Detective Ramirez's persistent efforts, were running out of avenues. Without a body, without a crime scene, without any physical evidence, the case was stagnating. Resources were diverted to newer, more active investigations. Sarah Jenkins became a photograph on a bulletin board in the cold case file room, a testament to a life tragically interrupted, a mystery deepening with each passing day. Emily's vivacious spirit was slowly eroded by the relentless grief and the maddening uncertainty. Her art supplies lay untouched, her focus entirely consumed by the void her sister had left behind. Her parents, once vibrant, now carried the heavy burden of a lost child, their eyes hollowed by a sorrow that time could not heal. The Honda Civic, left untouched in the apartment parking lot, was eventually sold, its mundane presence a cruel reminder. Sarah's apartment was packed up, her possessions stored away, a monument to a life abruptly halted. The case officially went cold, joining the ranks of hundreds of others, silent testament to the city's hidden darkness. Detective Ramirez, however, never truly let go. Sarah's file remained on his shelf, a grim reminder of a young woman who had simply vanished. He'd pull it out occasionally, reread the sparse notes, hoping a new detail, a forgotten angle, would jump out at him. But it never did. 8 years passed, each one adding another layer of dust to Sarah's memory, another layer of scar tissue to Emily's heart. The year was 2004. San Diego had changed. Cell phones were ubiquitous, the internet a daily utility, its early promise now a pervasive reality. But some things remained timeless, the relentless expansion of the city's infrastructure. A construction crew was excavating a forgotten stretch of land bordering an older industrial park, near the winding paths of Mission Trails Regional Park, an area known for its rugged canyons and hidden ravines. They were laying new fiber optic cables, digging deeper than usual to avoid existing utility lines. The work was dirty, tedious, and often uneventful. On a sweltering Tuesday afternoon in late August, almost exactly 8 years to the day Sarah had disappeared, a backhoe operator, a burly man named Gus Morneau, hit something solid. Not rock, not pipe, metal. He carefully maneuvered the machine, then dismounted to investigate. Buried about 6 feet down, beneath layers of compacted earth and rock, was a rusted, rectangular metal box. It looked like an old army surplus ammunition container, but it was sealed shut with a thick layer of what appeared to be epoxy or some kind of industrial sealant. Curious, Gus and his foreman carefully extracted it from the soil. It was heavy, surprisingly intact despite years underground. The foreman, a man who had seen his share of strange things unearthed, had a premonition. He called the police. Detective Alex Ramirez, now a lieutenant, was still with the SDPD. He received the call about a mysterious box found on a construction site. It was just another oddity in a city full of them, but something urged him to respond personally. Perhaps it was the location, or the age of the box, or simply the persistent whisper of cold cases in the back of his mind. He arrived to find the scene cordoned off, the box resting on a tarp, its surface pitted with rust. The bomb squad was called as a precaution, but quickly determined it posed no explosive threat. With a pry bar in careful hands, the seals were broken, and the lid groaned open. A collective gasp went through the small group gathered. Inside, nestled amongst layers of preserved, still damp newspaper clippings and a thin plastic sheet, were items that had been hermetically sealed from the ravages of time and moisture. The first thing Ramirez saw made his blood run cold. It was a professional ID badge from Scripps Mercy Hospital. The photo was slightly faded but unmistakable. Sarah Jenkins, her name, her face, from 1996. Next to the badge lay a small, leather-bound journal, its pages surprisingly intact, and beneath it, a single, slightly warped Polaroid photograph. Ramirez felt a surge of adrenaline, cold and electric. 8 years. 8 years of silence, of dead ends, of a family's unanswered grief. And now this, the journal was Sarah's. Her familiar, neat handwriting filled the pages. It was a private chronicle of her increasing fear, her desperate attempts to rationalize the growing dread. The entries detailed the hang-up calls, almost nightly by early August. They spoke of the man, Arthur Vance, whose initial polite attentiveness had morphed into a chilling, persistent presence. Sarah had meticulously documented his unsolicited appearances, his unnervingly familiar smiles from across the street, his car parked blocks from her apartment. She described his eyes, like chips of ice but with a fire burning deep within them. She wrote of a growing paranoia, her fear that she was overreacting, but also her gut instinct that something was profoundly wrong. In the final entries, scrawled with an increasing sense of urgency, she mentioned feeling followed after her late shifts, the sound of footsteps behind her, the unsettling knowledge that her routine was no longer private. The last entry, dated August 27, 1996, simply read, "He was there again. Outside the 7-Eleven, he saw me. I don't know what to do." The Polaroid was the most damning piece of evidence. It was a slightly blurry, candid shot of Arthur Vance, caught unawares, perhaps taken by Sarah from a distance, or in a moment of fleeting courage. His features, his intense gaze, were clear enough to be identifiable. The discovery sent shockwaves through the SDPD. The cold case was red hot. Lieutenant Ramirez immediately pulled Sarah's old file, the faint, faded notes now imbued with a terrifying new context. Arthur Vance. The name from Emily's initial, desperate interview, brushed aside then as a minor detail. Now he was the central figure. A rapid, intense investigation began. The Polaroid and the detailed descriptions from Sarah's journal were crucial. A national search for Arthur Vance was initiated. It turned out he had left San Diego abruptly in late 1996, just weeks after Sarah's disappearance, moving to a small, isolated town in rural Nevada. He had no criminal record to speak of, only a few minor incidents of restraining order violations years prior, all related to obsessive behavior towards women who had rebuffed him. He had remarried, settled into a quiet, unremarkable life. Lieutenant Ramirez and a team of detectives traveled to Nevada. Vance, now in his late 50s, was located. He was calm, almost aloof when confronted. He initially denied knowing Sarah Jenkins, feigned ignorance, even amusement. But when Ramirez laid out Sarah's ID badge, her journal entries detailing his escalating harassment, and finally, the Polaroid of his own face, something in Vance's icy eyes flickered. The carefully constructed facade crumbled. He didn't confess to murder in the traditional sense, not immediately. His story was a twisted narrative of unrequited love, a dangerous obsession that had spiraled out of control. He admitted to following Sarah, to watching her, to believing they were destined to be together. On the night of August 27th, he had waited for her outside the 7-Eleven. He had just wanted to talk, he claimed, to make her understand. He had forced her into his car, driven her out into the vast, unforgiving landscape beyond the city limits, a place where the lights of San Diego faded into nothingness. He had panicked when she fought, when she screamed. He couldn't remember the details clearly, or claimed he couldn't, but he admitted to burying her in a remote, rocky wash deep in the Anza-Borrego desert under the cover of darkness. He described the location with chilling precision, a place he had known from frequent hiking trips. The coordinates led law enforcement to a desolate, windswept corner of the desert, miles from any road. After a grueling search, the remains of Sarah Jenkins were finally found, exactly where Arthur Vance had described. 8 years of desert heat, wind, and scavengers had taken their toll, but the identification was conclusive. The news ripped through Emily's life, a bittersweet storm of grief and long-awaited closure. The years of agonizing uncertainty were over. Sarah was gone, undeniably, irrevocably, but she was no longer just a missing person. She was found. Her family could finally mourn, could finally lay her to rest with the dignity she deserved. Arthur Vance was arrested, tried, and ultimately convicted for her abduction and murder. The discovery of Sarah's box, a silent testament to a young woman's prescient fear, had been a random, almost miraculous stroke of fate. It spoke to the enduring power of human intuition, the small acts of self-preservation that, even in death, can bring justice. The sun still shone on San Diego, the ocean breeze still carried the scent of oleander and salt. But for Emily and the Jenkins family, the city would forever be etched with the memory of a light extinguished too soon, a life stolen by a quiet, insidious obsession. The case of Sarah Jenkins became a stark reminder of the hidden dangers lurking beneath the surface of everyday life, and the long, arduous journey to bring truth from the depths of a silent, forgotten grave.